This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional life that you're happy with. We tell MBA candidates to conduct informational interviews or coffee chats with people in the roles or at the companies that interest them. These one-on-one meetings offer a valuable opportunity to learn about a specific role, a career path, a company's business and culture, and to build your network. In the language of the book, Designing Your Life, and the related workshops we offer to all incoming students that apply design thinking principles to life design and career design, we call these meetings prototyping conversations. Whatever you call them, my guest on this episode has extensive experience with them and some helpful advice on how to approach informational interviews. My guest today is Asal Mirsalimi. Asal is a second-year MBA candidate in the class of 2019. And today we're going to talk not only about her experience with the Career Management Office, but also specifically her experience conducting informational interviews or coffee chats. Asal was a prolific coffee chatter during her internship at Starbucks. So welcome to the podcast, Asal.
Hi, Gregory. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Can you start by telling us just a little bit about what you were doing before you decided to get your MBA?
Yeah. I was a trust and estate planning CPA, so I worked in the public accounting industry mainly on trust and estates.
And when you decided to come to the program, what were you targeting for careers?
At first, I was a little confused. I thought I want to be in technology, maybe product management, and actually through kind of informational interviews and talking to second years, talking to people's experiences and exploring options, I ended up focusing more on finance and consulting.
Now, for your internship, I already let the cat out of the bag that you ended up at Starbucks. But what was your internship recruiting experience like overall?
At the time, it felt so long, even though it was really short, looking back at hindsight. But it basically involved a lot of, again, like I said, informational interviews, trying to see what's out there and what's the right fit for me and am I the right fit for those roles and companies? And then working with essentially career management, really doing so many different versions of my resume over and over to really perfect it. It felt like it was constantly a work in progress, just practice interviews, whether it was case interviews or just behavioral interviews, and really familiarizing myself with different companies.
What was the cadence of appointments? Were you coming in weekly? Were you coming in once a month?
For sure, weekly. I would say I definitely took advantage of everything Foster had to offer for practicing interviews. I think you could only have 2 appointments booked with career management. So at any time I had my 2 appointments booked. So I would do career management, peer advisors, and also different societies like consulting club or finance club, take advantage of basically the maximum number of appointments you could have booked at any given time. So I would say at least on a weekly basis, I was in the career management office, if not more.
I remember seeing you frequently. You said you did a number of informational interviews to get a better sense of what different roles would be like and to narrow your focus before you landed your internship opportunity at Starbucks, which was a corporate finance.
Yep.
But once you were at Starbucks, we had a meeting last summer, and you just blew me away with the number of informationals that you did while you were at Starbucks. Can you share that?
Yeah, so my internship was a 10-week internship, and I did over 50 informational interviews. So at least once a day, some days more than one person that I would just get a quick coffee chat. It was anywhere from half an hour to an hour, depending on how the conversation was going, if the person had time. And I really went above and beyond just the finance department. I reached out to people in product management, people in supply chain to really get a sense of taking advantage of this opportunity I was given being at a company that people were willing to chat with me about their experience and career path to really narrow down as I come back to second year what it is that I really would want to continue on post-graduation.
How did those interviews differ from the ones you conducted at the beginning of your time in the program?
I think in the beginning, I was not really sure what the right questions are to ask. And at the same time, it was a mix of should I ask questions about the role versus the company when I'm meeting with different people. Whereas over the summer, I was more focused on that specific career path of what do you do in supply chain? Like, what's a career path like? So it was a little bit more focused, and I think I had questions that I felt like were more curated towards what I needed to get to versus in the beginning, I was still a little confused and trying to figure out if this is a way for me to essentially put my name out there or resume out there for an interview, which was not the right way to look at it. So I think I figured it out by summer.
Now, you came in for Pro Dev Week and shared some of the lessons learned, and I seem to remember that you had almost like a taxonomy of informational interview types, like the goals of different types of informational interviews. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so essentially, I put it in two different paths of either you want to learn more about a specific role, whether it's corporate finance, investment banking, consulting, product management. And those set of questions are very different than a set of questions when you're trying to figure out the culture of a company and whether the company is a right fit for you. So going into an informational, you should be very targeted of what kind of information are you trying to get out of this person. And once you get to the point that you know what roles you're interested in, you've kind of identified your target company, then that's a different kind of informational interview, and the kind of person you would reach out to as well.
What are some of the questions that you like to ask?
Yeah, so if I wanted to learn more about the role, I would want to know really what are the most important skill sets within that role. For me, I realized one of the things I really liked was being client facing. So, how much of this role is actually client facing, whether the client is internal or external? And what do they really do? What's a career path like? What's a growth opportunity? And if they want to move from one industry to another, what are the differences? If you're looking at a company, I think for me personally, the culture is the most important part. So trying to figure out what the culture of the company is and whether it's the right fit.
What's the most awkward informational interview you've had? You don't have to name anybody, but just describe like an informational interview that went off the rails.
I can't think of a specific one, but there were definitely a few informationals that the conversation was all on me. I mean, I had informationals that we just went back and forth and it felt really great. And then I had informationals that if I wouldn't be asking the next question, there was this awkward quiet. So there are definitely, if you're going into informational interviews, you should really be prepared for a situation like that and be comfortable with it.
More like an interrogation. Hopefully not like this interview here.
No.
How do you find the right people to interview?
I would say Foster provides you with a really good network of people to reach out to. So for me, the easiest was to start with second years who had done internships in the roles I was interested in learning about or companies I was interested in learning more about. And then from there, they can also put you in touch with the people who just graduated. So they've just been in that job within the past year. So that more like the 1 year to 2 year fresh out of Foster alumni is probably the safest bet. They still remember
what it was
themselves,
like.
yeah, in your shoes, and they're happy to answer any questions. It's a judgment-free zone, and you can really feel comfortable and be vulnerable and ask all the questions that you want to truly know about, but you're not sure if this is the right question. That being said, I would never ask them about what the salary of this company is, but if you want to really be like, I really don't know what a product manager role actually is, like what's a better way for me to learn about this? Like these are the reasons I think I'm interested in it, but I'm not sure if that's actually the right way to look at it. Like that's a safe question to ask a recent alumni. And you also go to all the different talks hosted by Foster, especially during the orientation. There are different panels that further removed alumni, maybe 10, 15 years removed alumni are brought back in. And then you can kind of be curious about their path of since they left Foster to where they are today, because a lot of them have very interesting paths and changed roles and companies and even industries. So going after those people that you meet through Foster, and then you can always ask them if there's anybody based on specific interests that you have that they can put you in touch with. I definitely don't recommend just asking who's a good person for me to talk to next. That just doesn't come across authentic. But if you, let's say you are talking to somebody in consulting, you have a specific interest in some healthcare related consulting practice and they're not in that industry, but they may know somebody, that's a good way to ask to be put in touch with the next person.
Yeah, I think that's a great wrap-up question, framed properly. Is there anyone else that you think I should talk to about this thing we've just been talking about?
Exactly. And that's a good way to then keep in touch with that same person too, because you can reach back and say, hey, thank you so much for putting me in touch with this person. We had a great conversation. And maybe you have a follow-up for them now at that point.
Let's talk a little bit more about etiquette. What is the etiquette around asking for these conversations and then after the conversations have happened?
Yeah, so asking, I would definitely, if you meet them somewhere in person, ask for their business card and ask if it's okay to reach out for an informational. Most likely they will say yes. If somebody is putting you in touch, a lot of times they would ask you to kind of write the email of why you want to meet with this person, send it to them, and they will forward that email, make an introduction. I would say if you want an informational with someone, whether you've just met them and got their business card or somebody put you in touch, rule of thumb, I wouldn't wait more than 24 hours to just send the initial email or reply back to the email, because you want to do it while still fresh in their mind. And also keeping in mind that especially with things like career fair or panels, there are probably 15 other students who also are getting the same business card. So the sooner you reach out, the sooner you can meet with them. I waited too long to reach out to one specific person. And by the time that he had given me a time to meet, he was so overwhelmed with so many people that he asked everybody to go on a group networking session, which is still valuable, but not as intimate and valuable as a one-on-one. So don't wait if you're interested in learning about someone or if somebody is putting the effort of making an introduction. Don't wait for them to email you. You start the conversation.
And then after the fact, so you met in person for coffee, you picked up the check.
Yeah. So yeah. So I also would say that once you make an appointment, sending them times and make an appointment, always send the calendar invite. Professionals are not going to put it on their own calendar. Some may do. Most are too busy for that. They're used to getting a calendar invite. So if you are initiating the request to meet with somebody and you guys settled on a date and time, always send a calendar invite. I always reach out to them the day before or the morning of just for a confirmation email that we're still on, just in case something has changed. Always offer to buy them coffee. A lot of times professionals know you're a student, they've been in your shoes, and they may say no, or they may have an expense account, but you should always offer because they're meeting with 20 other people too, and they may just be a year out of school, so they shouldn't be sponsoring everybody's coffees. And then after you've met, make sure you send that thank you note again within the first 24 hours while it's still fresh in their mind. And if you're going to ask to be put in touch with somebody, make sure it's in that email, and also maybe leave room to see if you can reach out to them in the future if you have other questions as well, or if they said something about, oh, if like you apply, let me know, let them know when you're ready to send the resume that, hey, I dropped off my resume and excited to see what the next step is, or something like that.
Talk a little bit more about sort of the long range keeping in touch with people who you've met with. Obviously, if you're applying at their company, letting them know, but let's say you go to another company, do you always let some of those people know where you've ended up?
I think it depends on the relationship, especially first year. I went on so many coffee chats, and not everybody is somebody that you connect with, that you could have a natural friendship, I guess I would say, going forward, a connection that you're going to keep in touch. I would make sure I LinkedIn request everybody that I met, so at least I have them in my network. But if there are people that I've met multiple times with, then I probably had only one person that I kind of let them know, and then also got coffee throughout the summer with them. So I can't say that it's a lot of people that you would do that with, but if you have them on LinkedIn, they can naturally see where you ended up. And then if as you're preparing for coming back second year for applying for full-time positions, that's a good time to maybe reach out to them and say, hey, like I'm still interested in this company, and maybe some advice of what can you work on for the next round of interviews if you didn't the first time get the job.
So students shouldn't feel like every person they talk to is someone that they have to be updating throughout their entire career search experience. But on occasion, you'll make a stronger connection or a stronger bond with someone who you've had an informational interview with, and it will feel appropriate to let them know an update where you ended up or what you're thinking or where you're applying next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just has to come natural to both people, and you know it when it happens. So
after your 50 informational interviews, then you came back to campus in the fall and engaged in full-time recruiting. What was the full-time recruiting experience like, and how for you did that differ from the internship recruiting experience?
So for everybody is different, but for me personally, it was night and day. Full time I had my offer October 15th, and I think classes started September 25th. So or October 12th, I had my offer. It was so fast. During applying for internship, I was confident I'm going to get so many of these interviews because I had a pretty solid background in business, yet I didn't get many of those interviews or didn't succeed in them because I didn't really know what they're looking for. And full time, just again, like I kept in touch with career management also over the summer and updated my resume to the roles that I was interested in, continued networking with them. So coming into full-time is very targeted what I want to do. And because I had already gone through the process of knowing what questions are asked, I was able to use my internship experience and project and answer so many of those questions. And specifically, even during my internship, I asked for projects and work that would help me build stories for those questions I didn't have stories for. So that was definitely different. I was getting a lot more interviews. Most places I applied, I got an interview. I got into so many second rounds and offers for the target companies that I came into Foster targeting and finally ended up at.
So tell us, where'd you finally end up?
I will be starting at PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers in Seattle in their consulting advisory, management consulting with their finance effectiveness practice.
So what kind of projects did you try and get in your Starbucks internship that really teed you up for this kind of work?
Yeah, one of the biggest, most MBA terms, which is how do you deal with ambiguity, I can guarantee that it almost comes up in every single interview, regardless of the role that you're going to be going into, whether it's finance, product management, consulting. I came from a background of CPA. It's not very ambiguous. There is tax law, and then you go based on that. So for me, it was really difficult to come up with the stories, even though now looking back, like I know what was ambiguous. At the time, I didn't know how to build that. So I specifically asked my manager when I met with her, like a couple months before the summer, and I said, I really want to build skills in a project that's ambiguous, it's cross-functional, and it uses a lot of data, because I felt like I wasn't able to show my stories properly for those specific skills. So she ended up giving me a project which was all that and more. And that project was all I talked about in every single interview coming back.
I think that's a great piece of advice there, is to remember that when you're going into your internship, you do have some agency in the kind of projects in many cases that you end up working on. And to make that preference known to your manager is a great way to get the experience you're looking for. I'm wondering if there's other advice that you have for students, first-year students or rising second-year students, that, things that you wish you'd known then that you know now.
One thing is everything will work out at Foster, so you'll be fine. I would say one thing that for me was very challenging when I started the MBA program was you come in and you all of a sudden are amongst a peer group of very smart people, very ambitious people, and they all want to do something very different. So you are faced with all these different opportunities, and it's really easy to get lost in the crowd and all of a sudden get confused and lose focus of why you came to get an MBA. You start applying for every job that's out there just to get an internship. So staying focused, I think, would really lower your stress level. For me, if I had sat down and really wrote down everything I loved about every job I've had so far and everything that I definitely did not want to do again, would have really narrowed down my search and make sure I say no to things that would basically put me in a worse position than I was before, and give me a lower level of stress. So just remember that essay you wrote, maybe not exactly that essay, but why did you leave a probably really good career to come get an MBA, and focus on that.
And those other applications, they don't come without a cost, right? You mentioned when you don't get the interview, or when you get that first interview and you don't get the second interview, right? How does that feel?
So, Gregory, I'm going to call you on this because you gave me a really good advice that really made sense. I remember I came to your office, I was crying, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. They reach out to me. They are like, you have a great resume, apply. I apply, and then I don't get the interview. And I've applied for 80 different places, and that happened. And you told me, do you go out on a date with everybody who asks you out? And I was like, no. So that, for me, was a really good metaphor to start saying no to roles that I'm not interested, because the cost is, of course, the time that you put in to prepare that cover letter, to make your resume more curated to that job, to that company. So that's like a few hours a week that you can do something more important with. And then also just the emotional toll that you take when you don't get that job, even though you really think that you are qualified for it, and lose your confidence.
But didn't even really want it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the real rub there. You're like, I didn't even want it, but now I feel terrible that I didn't get it.
Exactly. So, yeah, stay focused and I would say, take that with a grain of salt. Definitely go beyond what just your two target companies and roles, because you do have to cast the net, but don't cast it too wide on roles that you're for sure not interested in, or companies that you definitely know you will not be a good fit for.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because there are a lot more companies out there hiring than perhaps you know about when you're entering the program. But having the focus either around functional area or industry, or specific companies, and making your decisions about what to apply for, which opportunities to pursue based upon some type of rubric or matrix, decision-making matrix, and not just, oh, this is the latest thing that has been posted on Foster Jobs, and everyone in my group's applying for it, so I should apply for it as well.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing, that when you come to Foster or any business school, you are probably really focused on one thing that you want to do, but you should stay open-minded because there may be other career paths that you would be really good at that you don't know about. So you should definitely, that's another reason informationals are good, because you learn about other careers that are out there that you may be really interested in and they may be a good fit. And also another thing, I said one thing, but it's two things. So the second thing would be, don't focus on what you wanted just for the internship, because a lot of times internship is a stepping stone for your full-time position. So maybe your resume right now, because a lot of these internships we're applying so early that we haven't had time to add more to our resume outside of what we did before MBA. So maybe your resume is right now not ready to get you to that specific job you wanted, but if you pick an internship that fills the holes to get you there, you ultimately will get that job for full-time recruiting.
Yeah, so thinking about the strategy of the internship as a step towards a goal, and maybe even that first position out of the MBA being another step towards the ultimate goal.
Exactly.
And I want to go back to something else you said, because I think it underscores the importance of early informational interviews, which is if you're not really sure what kind of opportunities are out there or what particular roles look like, spending that time in fall quarter to actually go out and meet with people and talk to them and have those informationals or those coffee chats is a great way to do that early research, so that when you start applying in December, January, February, you're applying for things that you know you'll be interested in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would say fall quarter Fridays for many of us, especially people focus on consulting because it's so much more networking based, was at least 3 or 4 coffee chats in downtown. So don't be afraid to spend the time early so that you can be ready when time comes to apply for those roles.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking with me and providing some advice for students who'll be in your shoes very shortly. I think this episode is filled with some great advice, and I appreciate you taking the time today. Let's recap some of the key advice from Asal. Start with current students in the class above you and work your way out from there. Don't delay scheduling conversations after you've been introduced or met the person you want to talk to. Always send a calendar invite and double-check the day of the meeting. Send a follow-up note after the meeting. Be prepared. Know what you want to get out of the meeting. Information about the role, career path, or company. Connect with everyone on LinkedIn and update the people you feel the strongest connection to. Thank you for listening to another episode of Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. I'd love to hear what you think about the podcast. You can email me at gheller@uw.edu. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or classmate. So on a day that you had 4 coffee chats, at what point did you switch to decaf?
Do tea at some of them. But yeah, I would say sometimes 3 coffees. Yeah. But also at that point of the program, you're so tired that you could consume 3 coffees. That's fine.